Buying all new ornaments for your tree can be really expensive. With a few things from the Dollar Tree, I'm going to show you how you can make 5 different styles of ornaments, and you can customize them to fit your own taste. I always appreciate that the Dollar Tree comes out with tubes of ornaments in different sizes and color. They're a little plain, so I wanted to give them more texture and I wanted them to fit my style. I'm starting with one of the medium-sized tubes of ornaments. There's 7 in this pack. I'm also going to be using one of these microfiber cloths. You can find this in the automotive section of the Dollar Tree, and I'm going to use some scrap fabric that I already had on hand. I started by cutting out a square of the microfiber cloth, and I wanted to make sure that this square was big enough that I could wrap it the whole way up around the ornament. I used a small amount of hot glue and I stuck my ornament right down in the center just to make sure that it wouldn't slide around anywhere. Once my glue had a chance to set, then I just gathered all of that material up to the top of the ornament, and I used a small piece of jute cord to tie it together to make sure all of that fabric stayed in place. Now, if you have some of those tiny little rubber bands that you use for hair, that would be a good thing to use here instead of twine. I think it would actually make it a little bit easier to hold that fabric in place, but I didn't have any of those, so the twine worked for me. Once the fabric is in place, then you can decorate these however you'd like. I'm going to keep this one a little more neutral, so I had some burlap ribbon in my stash. I tied a simple bow and I just hot glued that to the top of the ornament. I also added in a few pieces of greenery and some berries. This is a really easy style of ornament to put together, and depending on what your taste is, you can change up the types of fabrics you use or change up the embellishments that you put on it. I also really like that I was able to use up some of the little scrap pieces of things that I had around in my stash, like these little pieces of greenery and these berries. Now, to create a hanger for this ornament, I just took another piece of that same jute twine. I folded it in half and I tied a knot at the end of it. And then I just separated the layers of the material on top. I added a pretty generous amount of hot glue in the center there, and I just stuck that twine right down in and pinched the fabric up around it so that it would keep it in place. Now for my other type of fabric, I'm doing basically the same thing, but this time I'm using pinking shears to cut my square out, and the rest of the steps were the same. I just gathered the material up to the top of the ornament, secured it with some twine, and decorated it with a few things that I had laying around. Also keep this style of ornament in mind if you need a hostess gift for Thanksgiving. I know that's right around the corner. I think it would be really sweet to create all of these ornaments in a style that you know a person likes that's maybe hosting Thanksgiving this year. And when you show up to their house, you can give them a set of ornaments that they can put on their tree. I know a lot of people like to wait until after Thanksgiving to put their tree up. So if they're getting ready to decorate, I'm sure they'll really appreciate a brand new set of ornaments for their tree. I know a lot of you have mentioned that you like to do paper crafts as much as I do, so I wanted to show you a really easy way to create a paper ornament. Now don't worry if you don't have any special paper crafting tools. You don't need anything out of the ordinary for this. I'm going to start with some double-sided scrapbook paper, and I'm just cutting it down into 2x2 squares, and I'll need 12 of these squares all together. After all your squares are cut, just hold one of them in your hand so that it's forming a diamond shape, and make sure that the side of the scrapbook paper that you want to see is facing towards you. So in my case, I wanted the green side to show, so I made sure that it was facing upwards towards me, and I'm using my bone folder to curl the paper a little bit. It just makes it easier for the next step. You don't have to have a bone folder for this either. You could just use something like a Sharpie or a marker. You just want to give a little bend to that paper so that it's easier to curl. Now I'm taking all of my little square pieces and I'm just rolling the 2 points together on either side to form a shape that looks like an ice cream cone. So I'll zoom here in a little bit so you can see it better. So you can see I'm taking the points from each side and I'm just overlapping them in the center. And I'm using hot glue here because I think it sticks faster than paper crafting glue. And you can see it just makes a little ice cream cone shape. So if you get a little confused when you're trying to glue these together, instead of thinking of these pieces of paper as a square, think of them as a diamond and you're just rolling the two sides into each other. And you want to do that with all 12 pieces. I'm using a 1.5-inch circle punch to punch a few circles out of this glitter cardstock. If you don't have a paper punch, just use something like a small paint bottle and trace around it just to give you some circles. You'll need 2 for each ornament that you're going to make. So I laid my circle down on my silicone mat just to make sure that none of the glue seeped out. And I'm going to start placing all of my little cones on top of the circle. And I find it's easier if I work in sections. So I laid my first 2 cones down across from each other, and then I divided those sections in half, and I created something that looks like a plus sign. And now I just need to fill in the other gaps with the rest of my cones. So once you have that plus sign in place, it makes it a lot easier to space the other cones out in between all of them. And again, I'm using hot glue here because I think it works really well for paper, especially for something like this. It just sets up a lot faster than some of the traditional paper crafting glues. Now, once all of my cones are in place on top of my circle, you can see because of the points are a little bit smaller, it dips down in the center, and I do want to glue something in the center to cover those points up. So I need to fill that gap a little. I grabbed a craft stick and I just cut a few small pieces off and I hot glued that right into the center, and then I was able to glue my second circle on top of it. And I had this small wooden star in my stash, so I added that as a final embellishment. And you can see the difference here between the two that I created. The one I left the pattern side up when I was curling my papers, and the other one I did the green side. And for that one, I kept it pretty much the same, except instead of a star in the middle, I put a little snowflake in the middle, and then I finished each of them off with just a little gemstone. Now, to be able to hang this ornament, I'm just using a regular paper punch at the top of one of the cones to create a hole. And then I'm using some small red ribbon and I'm just slipping it through and pulling the ends through that loop and then tying a knot on the other end so that I have a way to hang these on my tree. I also made a few of these too to hang on either side of my mantle, and it looks really pretty. I love using snowmen when I'm decorating for Christmas and winter, so I wanted to create a few for on my tree. I have these wood slices that I ordered from Amazon. They're by the company Arteza. I know sometimes you can find the wood slices in the Dollar Tree, but I think whenever if you know you're going to use a lot of them, it makes more sense to buy a bigger pack like that. I'll also be using a few things for embellishments, and for the hats on my snowman, I'm going to use this roll of red felt that I found in the Crafter's Square section at the Dollar Tree. Now, as much as I like the wood grain on these slices, I do want my snowmen to look a little more traditional, so I'm using some white paint and I'm just covering the surface. I'm not worried about getting the whole way out to the edges because I do like having a little bit of that wood show, and I also did not want to get paint on any of the bark that's on the side of my slices. After my paint had a chance to dry, I went to Pinterest and I just searched for snowman faces, and I found a lot of great ideas on different styles of faces that I could put on my snowmen. Snowman faces are pretty easy to make. Basically, it's just a couple of circles and a carrot nose, but I did want mine to have a little more expression, so that's why I turned to Pinterest for a little bit of help with that. If you have a cutting machine, you could also cut out decals that you could place over your wood wood slices, but I wanted to try my hand at creating my own. I'm just using a Sharpie here to fill in all of the black parts, and I thought I was going to be able to use this orange Sharpie to create my carrot noses, but it was a little dried out. So I had enough ink left in the Sharpie marker that I could create the outline for the noses, and then I just went through with some orange paint and I filled all of the noses in like that. I cut a piece of that felt that was wide enough that I could wrap it around the wood slice and long enough to create a hat. And I forgot to mention, but when I was putting the faces on my wood slices, I made sure that I moved them down a little bit farther. I didn't put them right in the center because I wanted to have some space for my hat. So you can see here, I just added a little bit of hot glue on the front and tucked that piece of felt down on top of that glue, wrapped it around the back, and held it in place with a little bit more hot glue. Then I took a piece of jute twine and I gathered the felt up about 1.5 inches above the face of my snowman, and I tied it there, and that's what cinched my hat together. Now for this snowman, I'm just using a piece of that same microfiber cloth that I used earlier, and I'm running around the base of the hat to look like some faux fur. You can decorate these however you want. You could add some holly and berries, you could add some ribbon. Anything you have laying around will create a really cute hat. After my band was in place, then I just cut off a little excess felt, and I wanted to make this look like a tassel cap. So I'm using my scissors and I'm just cutting all of the rest of that felt above where I tied that jute into little fringy pieces. Now, if you wanted to get really creative here, instead of adding a hat to your snowman, you could use some ribbon or some felt or some fleece, and you could add scarves. You could do whatever you'd like. And you can decorate these in any style that you choose to. To finish this one off, I'm just going to use a little bow and glue it on the top. Now keep in mind, these make really great tree ornaments, but because they are flatter, I think it would look really cute if you put these on some of the gifts that you're giving this year. You could tie them right onto your packages. Dollar Tree has these really great packs of wood beads for Christmas. They come in red, green, and white, but I have a pretty big collection of wood beads of my own, so I wanted to create a few mini wood bead wreaths to hang on my tree. And this is a great craft too if you have kiddos in your life that you want to do a little craft project with, because you don't have to use a glue gun for this at all. I'm using a pipe cleaner to string all of my beads onto. I was originally going to use some jute twine, but then I was afraid that it was a little too flimsy and the wreath wouldn't hold its shape. But because the pipe cleaners have a wire running through them, I knew it would be able to keep that nice round shape. Now with the size beads that I'm using, which I would say is the standard size as far as wood bead goes, I found that 12 beads was a good amount to create a nice size circle. So you can see here, I just grabbed some and I formed a little pattern. And once I had all of my beads onto my pipe cleaner, I just took the two ends and I twisted them together. I used some wire cutters to cut the excess pipe cleaner off, and then I just tucked the little ends to the back. Now, before I got started on embellishing my little wood wreaths, I wanted to put the hanger on first, so I'm using some thinner ribbon, and I just cut a length of it and looped it around the top where that pipe cleaner was. I pulled the ends through the loop and then tied in a knot on the end so that I would have a way to hang it. You could also buy those really large packs of ornament hangers, you know, the ones that are made of metal, and you could just attach one of those to these also, but I really like the little pop of color that the ribbon gives it at the top. I chose to make bows to hot glue to the top of each of my wood bead wreaths, but if you were going to make this craft with kids, I would say buy a pack of the pre-made bows that have the twist ties on them, and then they could just twist them on themselves and you don't have to worry about them burning themselves with the hot glue. Or if you wanted to let them play around with ribbon, just let them tie it on rather than glue it on, and they could tie a bow that way. If you're like me, you probably like to decorate your tree with ornaments of different sizes. I want to show you how you can take some of these tubes of ornaments from the Dollar Tree and make them bigger so they can fill in some of those bigger gaps you might have on your tree. I'm starting with one of the red packs of ornaments, and I also grabbed a few of the smaller packs of ornaments that they have. These ones are a little bit fancier. They have some designs on them, and they usually only come two to a pack. I also have some ribbon in my stash I'm going to use and a few pipe cleaners. I want to start by cutting my ribbons for these bigger ornaments. I have two size ribbons here. One's much wider than the other one. I'm starting with the smaller ribbon and I cut two pieces at 8 inches. Then with my wider ribbon, I made that a little bit longer and I cut two pieces at 10 inches. I like to finish my ribbons in a dovetail shape, so I just folded them in half and I cut from the outside towards the inside on an angle, and that's what gave me that dovetail shape. I did that with both sets of the ribbons that I had already cut. You don't have to do a dovetail, you could just cut them on an angle if that would be easier for you. Now this is where it gets really easy to assemble these bigger ornaments. I just gathered up 3 ornaments. You can see I have a red one and 2 of the silver ones, and I strung them onto my pipe cleaner and I gave it a twist and it gave me this cute little ornament bundle. Then I took my 2 sets of ribbons and I'm laying them down with the smaller ribbon first and then the wider ribbon right behind it, and you can see here that I laid them out into an X shape over top of that pipe cleaner, and since the pipe cleaner has plenty of room left on it, I was able to just use that to cinch those ribbons together, and now I have this really cute bundle of ornaments with ribbons behind it, and you can already see how much bigger it is than the original ornament. I also had this silver poinsettia in my stash, so I finished all of this off with that just to give it a little bit of an extra embellishment. There's also plenty of pipe cleaner left on the back that's what I'll use to attach it to my tree. I'll just wrap it around one of the branches and it'll be nice and secure. Thanks so much for coming to hang out with me again today. Let me know in the comments how you like to decorate your tree. All right, everyone, I hope you have a great week, and I'll talk to you in the next one.